What if the Dursleys supported Harry's magic from the beginning? Chapter 1: A Change of Heart. The crisp November air held a hint of frost as Petunia Dursley opened her front door that fateful morning. The milk bottles clinked softly as she bent to retrieve them, but instead, her hand froze mid-reach. There, bundled in a thick blanket, lay a baby with a curious lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. Her sharp intake of breath materialized as a small cloud in the cold morning air. For several long moments, she stood perfectly still, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew, without even reading the letter tucked beside the infant, exactly who this child was. Her nephew, Lily's son. With trembling hands, she gathered the basket, careful not to wake the sleeping child. The street was eerily quiet, save for the distant rumble of early morning traffic and the gentle rustle of fallen leaves. As she carried the basket inside, she caught Mrs. Number 7 peering through her curtains. Petunia lifted her chin, daring her nosy neighbor to say anything about the unexpected delivery. In the warmth of her kitchen, Petunia placed the basket on the table and finally allowed herself to look properly at the baby. He had Lily's nose, she noticed, and when he shifted slightly in his sleep, she caught a glimpse of those unmistakable green eyes, her sister's eyes. The letter lay beside him, sealed with a peculiar purple wax stamp bearing a coat of arms she recognized from years ago, an H surrounded by 4 animals. Her fingers shook as she broke the seal and began to read. "Vernon," she called out, her voice catching. "Vernon, come down here immediately." Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs, followed by her husband's concerned voice. "Pet, what's wrong? Is it Dudley?" Vernon Dursley appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his pajamas, his mustache slightly askew from sleep. He stopped short at the sight of the basket on their kitchen table. "What's all this then?" he asked, moving closer to peer at the sleeping infant. "It's Harry," Petunia whispered, holding out the letter. "Lily's boy." Vernon's face cycled through several colors as he read the letter over her shoulder: red, white, purple, and finally settling on a pale gray. "Dead." He repeated, his voice unusually soft. "Both of them?" Petunia nodded, unable to speak. Tears she hadn't realized she'd been holding back began to fall. Harry slept on, peaceful and unaware that his world had been irrevocably altered. His small hand clutched the blanket, and for a moment, Petunia saw another baby, another time. Lily, sleeping in their parents' garden, wild flowers blooming unexpectedly around her crib. "I was so terrible to her, Vernon," Petunia whispered, her voice breaking. "All those years, all that jealousy, and now she's gone forever." Vernon watched his wife carefully. In their years of marriage, he had learned to follow her lead when it came to matters of her sister. He had adopted her disdain for the magical world more out of loyalty than genuine feeling. Now, seeing her pain, he felt something shift inside him. "What do you want to do, pet?" asked quietly, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. Petunia looked at her sleeping nephew, then toward the stairs where their own son Dudley slept peacefully in his crib. The decision crystallized in her mind with surprising clarity. "I want to do better," she said firmly. "I want to raise him the way Lily would have raised Dudley if our situations were reversed, with love, acceptance, and understanding." Vernon's mustache twitched, a sure sign he was processing something difficult. "But the boy? He'll be magical like them." "Yes," Petunia said, straightening her back. "And this time I won't let fear destroy another relationship. We'll help him understand his gift, not shame him for it. We'll learn about his world instead of hiding from it." "But what about our Dudley?" Vernon asked, glancing toward the stairs. "Won't it be unfair to him, having a magical cousin?" Petunia thought carefully before responding. "We'll raise them as brothers," she said finally. "No favorites, no prejudices, just family. And who knows, maybe understanding magic will be good for Dudley too. Knowledge is never a bad thing. Isn't that what you always say about your business?" Vernon nodded slowly, warming to the idea. "Could be useful, I suppose. Having a foot in both worlds, as it were, might even be good for business someday." As they discussed the practicalities of raising a magical child, Harry began to stir. His green eyes opened, focusing first on Petunia, then on Vernon. Instead of crying at the strange faces, he smiled a bright, innocent smile that made Petunia's heart ache with memories of Lily. Then something extraordinary happened. The sugar bowl on the table began to float, rising several inches into the air before settling back down gently. A few sugar crystals spilled over the edge, sparkling like tiny diamonds in the morning light. Vernon's face reddened, but before he could react, Petunia laughed a soft, wondering sound. "Just like his mother," she said, reaching out to stroke Harry's cheek. "She used to make the teacups dance when she was happy." Something in her voice made Vernon pause, He'd never heard Petunia speak of her sister's magic with anything but bitterness before. The love in her tone now was unmistakable, tinged with regret but also hope. "We'll need to make some changes," he said thoughtfully. "The spare room will need to be converted into a proper nursery, and I suppose we should learn more about their world. Properly, I mean, not just rumors and such." Petunia wiped her eyes and stood straighter. "Yes, we should, and we'll need to register him somewhere. They must have their own doctors, their own ways of checking on magical children." Lily mentioned something once about St. Mungo's. As they discussed plans, Harry reached out and grabbed Vernon's finger with surprising strength. The large man looked down at the tiny hand wrapped around his finger and felt his reservations beginning to melt. "Welcome home, Harry," Petunia said softly, and in that moment she felt as if Lily was there with them, smiling in approval. The rest of that morning was spent in careful preparation. Vernon called his office to take a rare day off, citing family emergency. Petunia went upstairs to prepare the spare room, bringing down Dudley's backup crib. When Dudley woke, they introduced him to his new cousin, and to their amazement, both boys seemed to take to each other immediately. As she watched the two Barbies interact, Petunia made a silent promise to her sister. This time would be different. This time, she would embrace the magic instead of fearing it. This time, she would be the sister and aunt she should have been all along. Little did the Dursleys know that their decision that morning would change not just Harry's life, but the entire future of both the magical and Muggle worlds. The boy who lived would grow up in a home filled with love, understanding, and acceptance of his magical heritage, setting in motion events that would reshape both societies in ways no one could have predicted. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, adjustments, and moments of doubt. But as Petunia watched Harry and Dudley falling asleep together in the living room that evening, she knew they had made the right choice. This was their chance to heal old wounds and create something beautiful from tragedy. And somewhere, she was sure, Lily was watching and smiling. Chapter 2: First Signs. Christmas of 1981 brought more than just festive decorations to number 4 Privet Drive. Snow fell gently outside the windows, coating the garden in a pristine white blanket, while inside, the house was warm with the scent of cinnamon and gingerbread. Petunia had outdone herself that year, determined to make their first Christmas as a family of 4 special. The tree sparkled with lights and ornaments. Presents wrapped in shining paper were piled underneath, and 2 small stockings hung from the fireplace, one embroidered with Dudley in blue thread, the other with Harry in green. "Now then, boys," Vernon said, adjusting his camera as both toddlers wobbled on their feet, holding onto the coffee table. "Show Dad how you can walk." Dudley, slightly larger and more stable on his feet, took 2 confident steps before plopping down on his bottom. Harry, not to be outdone, released his grip on the table and managed 3 wobbly steps toward his cousin before falling forward. But Harry never hit the ground. Instead, he seemed to float for a moment, suspended inches above the carpet, before settling down gently beside Dudley. The Christmas tree lights began to twinkle in unusual patterns, responding to Harry's delighted giggles. Vernon, who had captured the entire moment on camera, lowered the device slowly, his eyes wide. "Did you see that, pet? He just floated." "Oh, yes," Petunia said, smiling as she remembered. "Lily did the same thing when she was learning to walk. Mum and Dad were terrified at first, but then they couldn't stop bragging about how their little girl would never get hurt from falling." Rather than fear or disapproval, there was a note of pride in her voice. She had been working hard these past weeks to change her perspective on magic, to remember the wonder she'd felt before jealousy had poisoned everything. Dudley, completely unfazed by his cousin's magical display, clapped his hands and reached for Harry. "Why?" he declared, one of his first attempts at words. "That's right, Dudders," Vernon said, setting down the camera and scooping up both boys. "Harry did a neat trick, didn't he?" The moment was interrupted by a tap at the window. A tawny owl sat on their snow-covered windowsill, a letter clutched in its beak. "Ah," Petunia said, moving to open the window. "That'll be from them, I expect. The magical authorities." She had been waiting for this. After discovering Harry on their doorstep, she had spent weeks gathering her courage before sending a letter to the only magical address she remembered, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. She had written to Professor McGonagall, whom she vaguely remembered from Lily's school days, asking for guidance on raising a magical child. The owl hopped inside, shaking snow from its feathers, and dropped the letter on the kitchen counter. Petunia offered it a piece of bacon from breakfast, which it accepted graciously before flying off. The letter was written on the same heavy parchment as the one that had accompanied Harry, sealed with the Hogwarts crest. Dear Mrs. Dursley, I was both surprised and pleased to receive your letter regarding young Harry Potter. Your willingness to learn about and support your nephew's magical heritage is commendable. As you requested, I have arranged for a representative from the Department of Magical Children's Services to visit you next week. They will provide you with information about raising a magical child in a non-magical household, as well as establishing the necessary monitoring and support systems. I have also taken the liberty of including several pamphlets about common manifestations of early childhood magic and how to handle them safely. Please note that what you're seeing now, the floating, the affected lights, the occasional spontaneous toy repair, is completely normal for a magical child of Harry's age. If you have any immediate concerns before the representative's visit, you may reach me by owl at any time. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Included with the letter were several colorful pamphlets with titles like Your Magical Child and You, a guide for non-magical parents and early signs of magic, what to expect. Well, Vernon said, reading over her shoulder while bouncing both boys on his knees, that's proper official support, isn't it? Just like when we registered Dudley with the NHS. Petunia nodded, already flipping through one of the pamphlets. Look at this, Vernon. It says here that magical children often show their first signs of magic in moments of strong emotion, happiness, fear, excitement, and there's a whole section about child-proofing the house for magical safety. Better get on that then, Vernon said, watching as Harry's giggles made the Christmas tree lights dance again. Though I must say, it's rather festive, isn't it? Like having our own light show. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur of wrapping paper, toys, and more magical displays. When Harry became excited about a stuffed dragon toy sent by Professor McGonagall, according to the tag, it began to move its wings and tail, much to Dudley's delight. That evening, after both boys were tucked into their cribs, they had decided to keep them in the same room after noticing how much calmer both Barbies were together. Petunia and Vernon sat in the living room, discussing their plans. You'll need to redecorate their room soon, Petunia said, making notes in her planner. They're almost too big for the cribs, and the representative might have suggestions about magical safety for toddlers. Vernon nodded, reviewing the pamphlets. Says here we should expect more instances of accidental magic as they grow. Might be worth warning the neighbors in a roundabout way. Tell them Harry's gifted or something similar. Mrs. Number 7 already suspects something, Petunia said with a slight smirk. Saw her watching when Harry's toy car rolled uphill in the garden last week. But you know what? I don't care what they think anymore. Vernon reached over and squeezed her hand. You've changed, pet. In a good way, I mean. Haven't seen you this happy in years. Petunia's eyes filled with tears. I just keep thinking about Lily, about all the years I wasted being jealous and bitter. I can't change that now, but I can make sure her son grows up knowing he's loved and accepted. And maybe, she hesitated, then continued, maybe it's healing something in me too. A cry from upstairs interrupted their conversation. They found Harry standing in his crib, tears streaming down his face from what was clearly a nightmare. Before either adult could reach him, Dudley had somehow managed to climb from his crib into Harry's, wrapping his chubby arms around his cousin. There now, Vernon said softly, lifting both boys out. Dudley's got the right idea. Family takes care of family. As they settled into the rocking chair with both boys, the nightlight began to glow in changing colors, responding to Harry's calming emotions. Dudley watched the lights with fascination, patting Harry's head as if to encourage more magical displays. You know, Petunia said thoughtfully, I think Dudley might be good for Harry, having someone his age who accepts his magic without question. That's something special, Vernon agreed, watching as both boys drifted back to sleep. And Harry might be good for Dudley too, teaching him about wonder and acceptance from the start. Not to mention, he added with a chuckle, he'll have the most interesting stories to tell at school about his cousin's tricks. As they tucked the boys back into Harry's crib, neither parent having the heart to separate them, Petunia thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. They had years of magical development to navigate, a whole new world to understand, and eventually, they would have to help Harry understand his place in the magical world as the boy who lived. But looking at the two cousins sleeping peacefully together, she knew they were on the right path. The love in their home was stronger than any fear or prejudice, and it would shape both boys into something extraordinary. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, a phoenix sang a song of hope and new beginnings. Chapter 3: Growing Together. The representative from the Department of Magical Children's Services arrived on a crisp January morning in 1982. Ms. Amelia Winterbourne was a kindly witch in her 50s who had cleverly disguised her robes as a sensible business suit, though the slight shimmer around the edges gave away their magical nature to those who knew what to look for. "You have a lovely home, Mrs. Dursley," she said, accepting a cup of tea as they sat in the living room. Both boys were napping upstairs, monitored by Vernon, who had taken another rare day off work for this important meeting. "Thank you," Petunia replied, fighting her natural instinct to sit stiffly. "We've tried to make it as accommodating as possible for Harry's abilities." Ms. Winterbourne smiled warmly. "Yes, Professor McGonagall mentioned your letter. It's quite refreshing, you know. We don't often see non-magical families so eager to embrace their magical children's gifts." She reached into her handbag, which seemed to hold far more than its size should allow, and pulled out several thick folders. "I've brought everything you'll need to get started. Medical records from St. Mungo's Hospital, including Harry's birth certificate and early health checks, guidelines for magical child development, and of course, the registration papers for our department's support services." Petunia leaned forward eagerly. "Medical records? You mean there are records from Lily's pregnancy?" "Oh yes," Ms. Winterbourne said softly, understanding flickering in her eyes. "Your sister was very thorough with her prenatal care. Would you like to see?" As Petunia pored over the medical files, tears gathering in her eyes at the sight of Lily's name and the moving photographs of baby Harry in the womb, Ms. Winterbourne continued her explanation. "We typically assign a magical support worker to non-magical families raising magical children. They visit regularly to check on the child's magical development and help parents handle any accidental magic incidents. Given Harry's unique situation, I would be happy to take on this role myself." "Unique situation?" Vernon asked, coming downstairs after ensuring both boys were sound asleep. "Well, yes," Ms. Winterbourne said carefully. "Harry Potter is, as I'm sure you're aware, rather famous in our world. We want to ensure he has as normal a childhood as possible while still receiving the support he needs. We've noticed his magic responds strongly to his emotions," Petunia said, setting down Lily's medical records, "especially when he's happy or scared. Just yesterday, he turned all of Dudley's toy cars different colors when they were playing together." Ms. Winterbourne nodded approvingly. "That's perfectly normal for his age. In fact, it's a good sign that his magic manifests during play. It suggests he feels safe and secure. Many magical children first show their abilities in moments of fear or distress, but Harry seems to be quite comfortable with his gift." She reached into her seemingly bottomless bag again and pulled out what looked like a small glass globe. "This is a magic monitor, standard issue for families like yours. It helps track accidental magic episodes and alerts our office if there's anything potentially dangerous. It also creates a small dampening field that can help contain particularly strong bursts of magic." Vernon examined the globe with interest. "Like a magical smoke detector then?" "Exactly," Ms. Winterbourne beamed. "Many Muggle-born children accidentally set things on fire when they're young. This helps prevent any serious incidents." A cry from upstairs interrupted their conversation, followed by the distinct sound of giggling. Petunia rose to check on the boys, but Ms. Winterbourne held up a hand. "If you don't mind, I'd like to observe them naturally. It helps me assess their interaction and Harry's magical development." They climbed the stairs quietly, pausing in the doorway of the boys' room. Harry and Dudley were both awake in their respective beds, but what caught everyone's attention were the stuffed animals floating in lazy circles between them, like a gentle mobile. Dudley was clapping his hands in delight, pointing at each animal as it passed. Again, "How make bear dance?" Harry, his green eyes bright with concentration, seemed to be controlling the toy's movement with pure joy. The stuffed bear did a little somersault in the air, causing both boys to burst into fresh giggles. Ms. Winterbourne made a few notes on a parchment that had appeared in her hand. "Remarkable control for his age," she murmured. "And even more remarkable is your son's reaction, Mrs. Dursley. Most non-magical children would be frightened or jealous. We've made sure Dudley understands that Harry's abilities are special but normal," Vernon said proudly. "No different than some children being good at sports or music." The witch's approval was evident. "That attitude will make all the difference as they grow up. Now, shall we discuss their educational plans? While Harry won't start formal magical education until Hogwarts at 11, there are several pre-magical learning programs we recommend. They returned downstairs, leaving the boys to their play. Over the next hour, Ms. Winterbourne outlined a comprehensive plan for the coming years. We'll start with basic magical awareness exercises around age 4, she explained, spreading out several colorful brochures. Simple things like helping Harry recognize when he's about to perform accidental magic and giving him some basic control. Nothing too structured. Children this young need to let their magic develop naturally. And what about regular schooling? Petunia asked. You were planning to send both boys to the local primary school. That's perfect, Ms. Winterbourne assured her. Harry should absolutely attend regular school with Dudley. Socialization with non-magical children is important, and it will help him understand both worlds he belongs to. We'll arrange for a subtle monitoring charm to prevent any obvious magical incidents at school. Vernon, who had been taking notes in his business planner, looked up. What about, well, his fame? When should we tell him about that? The witch's expression grew serious. That's a delicate matter. I would recommend starting around age 5 or 6 with simple explanations about his parents and what happened. He should understand his place in our world before he encounters others who might tell him in less appropriate ways. Petunia clutched Lily's medical records closer. I have photos of Lily and James, and some of Lily's old school things in the attic. Would those help? Absolutely, Ms. Winterbourne said warmly. Personal connections to his parents will be invaluable, and speaking of which, she pulled out another folder. These are copies of James and Lily Potter's wills. They were recently released by Gringotts Our Bank. There's a trust vault for Harry's education and some personal items being held until he's older. Rest of the morning was spent discussing practical matters, how to contact magical medical help if needed, setting up a secure Owl Post connection, and arranging future visit schedules. By the time Ms. Winterbourne prepared to leave, both Dursleys felt more confident about the path ahead. One last thing, she said, pausing at the door. You mentioned having some of Lily's old school things. You might want to look through them. Sometimes magical children inadvertently enchant their possessions. It could help you understand what to expect with Harry. After she left, Petunia went up to the attic while Vernon watched the boys. In a dusty corner, she found the box she hadn't opened in years, Lily's old school trunk, which their parents had sent after everything. Inside, she found textbooks, old robes, and a photo album. But what caught her eye was a small diary, its pages filled with Lily's flowing handwriting. The first entry was dated September 1st, 1971. Dear Diary, today I started at Hogwarts. I wish Tuny could see it. The castle is more magical than anything we ever imagined playing in the garden. Maybe one day she'll understand that magic isn't scary, it's wonderful. Petunia wiped away tears as she read. Her sister had never given up hope that they would reconcile. Now through Harry, she had a chance to finally understand and embrace the world that had once driven them apart. A burst of laughter from downstairs drew her attention. She found Vernon sitting on the floor with both boys, watching in amusement as Harry's magic had apparently turned Dudley's hair bright blue. Look, pet, Vernon chuckled. Dudley asked for blue hair like his cartoon character, and Harry obliged. Watching her son and nephew playing together, seeing the easy acceptance between them, Petunia felt a weight lift from her heart. This was how it should have been with her and Lily, wonder and love instead of fear and jealousy. Ms. Winterbourne left some color reversal sweets, Vernon added, holding up a small paper bag. Said we might need them. Clever woman. Yes, Petunia said, sitting down with her family. I think we're in good hands. That evening, as they put the boys to bed, Petunia placed Lily's photo album on the bookshelf. Soon, Harry would be old enough to understand who he was and where he came from. But for now, he was simply their nephew, Dudley's cousin, and a beloved member of their family. The magic monitor glowed softly on the dresser, its gentle light a reminder that they were no longer alone in navigating this magical journey. Outside, an owl hooted softly, and the stars twinkled like tiny magical lights in the dark sky. Chapter 4: Growing Awareness. Summer of 1984 brought both challenges and delights to number 4 Privet Drive. At age 4, Harry's magical abilities were becoming more pronounced and more intentional. No longer were they simply reactive bursts of accidental magic. He was beginning to show signs of conscious control. Uncle Vernon, watch this," Harry called out one sunny morning, standing in the backyard with Dudley. Both boys were dressed in matching shorts and t-shirts, their knees grass-stained from playing. Vernon looked up from his weekend paper, adjusting his position in the lawn chair. Over the past few years, he had lost considerable weight chasing after two energetic boys had that effect. "What is it, Harry?" Harry scrunched up his face in concentration, holding his hand out toward a fallen leaf. Slowly, wobbling slightly, the leaf rose from the ground and danced through the air. "That's brilliant." Dudley clapped. "Do the spinning thing again." The leaf began to spin like a tiny helicopter, drawing delighted giggles from both boys. Vernon beamed with pride, though he quickly glanced at the fence to ensure none of the neighbors could see. "Well done, Harry," he said. "But remember what Ms. Winterbourne said about practicing. Only in the backyard or inside," both boys chorused, having heard this rule many times. Petunia emerged from the house carrying a tray of lemonade and biscuits. Over the years, her once severe hairstyle had softened, and smile lines had replaced her former pinched expression. "I saw that from the kitchen window," she said, setting down the tray. "You're getting better at controlling it, Harry." As the boys rushed for the treats, a familiar shimmering appeared in the air, solidifying into the form of Ms. Winterbourne. After 3 years of regular visits, the family barely blinked at her magical arrivals. "Sorry to pop in unannounced," she said, accepting the lemonade Petunia offered, "but I detected some controlled magic use. Quite impressive for your age, Harry." Harry beamed at the praise, while Dudley proudly announced, "He's been practicing every day. I help by telling him what to make the leaves do." Ms. Winterbourne settled into a conjured chair, her expression thoughtful. "That's actually why I'm here. Given Harry's growing control, I think it's time we started some basic magical education. Nothing formal," she added quickly, seeing Vernon's concerned look, "but some simple exercises to help him understand and manage his abilities." "Like what?" Petunia asked, while the boys listened intently. "Well, for instance," Ms. Winterbourne plucked a leaf from the air where Harry had left it floating. "Instead of just making objects move, Harry could practice setting them down gently. Control isn't just about making magic happen, it's also about making it stop safely." She spent the next hour showing Harry simple focusing exercises, with Dudley acting as an enthusiastic assistant. By the end of the session, Harry could not only make leaves dance, but could return them to the ground without crumpling them. "Excellent progress," Ms. Winterbourne said, making notes in her ever-present folder. "Now, there's another matter we should discuss." She glanced meaningfully at the adults, perhaps while the boys finished their snacks. Inside the kitchen, Ms. Winterbourne's expression grew serious. "Harry's 5th birthday is approaching. As we discussed last year, this is typically when we recommend beginning to tell magical children about their history, especially in Harry's case." Petunia gripped her glass of lemonade tightly. She and Vernon had been preparing for this moment, reading through Lily's old letters and diaries, collecting photographs, and discussing how best to explain everything to both boys. "We've been telling him small things about Lily and James," Vernon said, "that they were brave, that they loved him very much, that they died protecting him." "Good," Ms. Winterbourne nodded. "That's a perfect foundation, but soon he'll need to know more. Other magical children his age already know the story of the boy who lived. When he starts primary school this autumn, he might encounter children from magical families who recognize his name." "How do we tell a 5-year-old that a dark wizard murdered his parents?" Petunia whispered, her voice catching. "That he's famous for surviving something so horrible." Ms. Winterbourne reached into her bag and withdrew a slim, beautifully illustrated book. "This might help. It's called The Boy Who Lived, a Children's Tale. It explains the events in an age-appropriate way, focusing on love and protection rather than the darker elements. Many magical families use it to introduce their children to recent history. The last week of July arrived with unusual weather. Shooting stars had been spotted across Britain, and a peculiar mist hung in the air despite the summer heat. The magical world, Ms. Winterbourne explained, was celebrating early. They always do this around Harry's birthday, she told the Dursleys. The anniversary of, well, you know. On the morning of July 31st, 1985, Harry woke to find his ceiling speckled with gently floating lights, a bit of magical decoration Ms. Winterbourne had helped Petunia arrange. Dudley burst into his room wearing a party hat and carrying a badly wrapped present. "Happy birthday," he shouted, jumping onto Harry's bed. "Open mine first." The present turned out to be a handmade comic book, drawn in Dudley's wobbly but enthusiastic style, titled The Adventures of Harry and Dudley. The crude drawings showed both boys having magical adventures, with Harry performing impossible feats while Dudley cheered him on. "Look, I made you a superhero." Dudley said proudly. Because you can do special things. Petunia and Vernon, watching from the doorway, exchanged meaningful looks. Perhaps this was the perfect opening. After breakfast and more presents, including a toy broomstick that hovered a few inches off the ground, another of Ms. Winterbourne's contributions, the family gathered in the living room. The illustrated book lay ready on the coffee table. Harry, Petunia began gently, pulling him onto her lap while Dudley sat close by. We want to tell you a special story about your mum and dad and about you. Harry's green eyes lit up. He always loved hearing about his parents. Vernon picked up the book, its cover showing a beautiful illustration of a stag and doe standing protectively around a baby. Once, Vernon read, his voice steady despite his nervousness, there was a very brave witch named Lily and a very brave wizard named James. The story unfolded gently, with magical illustrations moving across the pages. It spoke of love and sacrifice, of a dark wizard whose name was written as He Who Must Not Be Named, and of a baby protected by his mother's love. The illustrations showed no violence, only symbols, darkness overcome by light, love conquering fear. The baby in the story, Petunia said softly, was you, Harry. Your mum and dad loved you so much that their love protected you, and that's why. She touched his scar gently. You have this mark. It's a symbol of how much they loved you. Harry touched his scar, his expression thoughtful. Is that why sometimes people in funny clothes wave at me in shops? Yes, Vernon nodded. In the magical world, you're quite famous. They call you the boy who lived. Like a superhero, Dudley interjected excitedly. I knew it, that's why I drew the comic. Harry's face scrunched up in confusion. But I don't remember doing anything special. The special thing, Petunia explained, hugging him close, was being so loved. Your mum's love was the strongest magic of all. That's why we keep her picture by your bed, so you always remember how much she loved you. And we love you too, Dudley added firmly, even though we can't do magic like Aunt Lily. The conversation continued throughout the morning, with Harry asking questions and his family answering as honestly as they could while keeping things age-appropriate. Ms. Winterbourne had prepared them well, providing answers for the most likely questions. Will the bad wizard come back? Harry asked at one point, his voice small. Many people think he's gone forever, Vernon said carefully, following Ms. Winterbourne's guidance. But even if he isn't, you're safe. You have us, and all the magical protections, and lots of brave wizards and witches watching out for you. By lunchtime, Harry seemed to have processed the basic information. He was more interested in his toy broomstick than his fame, racing around the garden with Dudley while making whooshing noises. He's handling it well, Ms. Winterbourne commented, appearing with her usual shimmer, though you should expect more questions as he processes everything. She was right. Over the next few weeks, Harry would randomly ask things like, did my mum like birthday cake too? Or was my dad good at sports? Each question was answered with stories from Lily's letters or the information Ms. Winterbourne provided. September brought another milestone, primary school. The local school had been carefully vetted by both the Dursleys and magical authorities. Subtle charms were placed to prevent Harry's magic from becoming too obvious, and the boys were placed in the same class. Remember, Petunia told them both on their first morning, adjusting their matching uniforms, you're brothers in all the ways that matter. Look out for each other. And they did. When some children teased Harry about his scar, Dudley stood up for him. When others were jealous of Dudley's new school supplies, Harry shared everything he had. They were a united front, navigating the non-magical world together. Strange things still happened occasionally, books flying off shelves when Harry was excited, scraped knees healing mysteriously fast, windows suddenly opening on hot days, but their classmates usually dismissed these incidents as coincidence or imagination. One autumn afternoon, their teacher kept Harry after class, looking concerned. Harry, she said gently, I wanted to talk about your creative writing assignment. The story about your parents. Harry tensed, remembering Ms. Winterbourne's warnings about keeping magic secret. But Petunia, waiting outside, smoothly intervened. Harry's parents died protecting him from a very bad person, she explained, using the prepared story they had developed. We encourage his imagination as a way of processing that. His therapist says it's healthy. The mention of therapy and the implication that Harry was processing trauma was enough to stop most adult questions. The teacher's concern turned to sympathy, and Harry was encouraged to continue his creative writing. As Christmas approached, Harry and Dudley sat in their shared bedroom, now decorated with both magical and non-magical items. The magic monitor glowed softly, and Harry's toy broomstick hung on the wall beside Dudley's bicycle helmet. Do you ever wish you had magic too? Harry asked his cousin suddenly. Dudley considered this seriously. Sometimes, he admitted, but then I think about how I get to help you practice and learn about magic stuff, and that's pretty cool too, like being a superhero's sidekick. Harry grinned. You're not a sidekick, you're my brother. Right, Dudley agreed, and brothers stick together even if one of them makes the Christmas lights go all wiggly. As if on cue, the string of lights decorating their window began to dance. Outside, snow began to fall, and somewhere in the distance, another shooting star celebrated the boy who lived not for his fame or his scar, but for the love that surrounded him, both magical and mundane. Chapter 5: The Magic of Friendship. Spring of 1987 brought new challenges and discoveries to number 4 Privet Drive. At age 7, Harry's magical abilities had become a normal part of daily life for the Dursley household, as routine as Dudley's Saturday morning cartoons or Vernon's morning paper. The back garden had become a sanctuary of sorts, protected by carefully placed magical wards that Ms. Winterbourne had installed to prevent nosy neighbors from seeing anything unusual. Here Harry could practice his growing control over magic, while Dudley acted as his enthusiastic audience and self-appointed coach. "Try to make it go higher this time," Dudley called out, pointing at the paper airplane hovering between them. Harry's face scrunched in concentration, his green eyes focused intently on the folded paper as it rose steadily upward. "Boys," Petunia called from the kitchen window, "your friends will be here soon for the study group." The paper airplane gracefully floated back to Earth as Harry relaxed his concentration. Over the past year, the Dursleys had carefully begun allowing select classmates to visit children who had shown themselves to be open-minded and trustworthy. It was Ms. Winterbourne's suggestion, part of her plan to help Harry learn to navigate both magical and non-magical social circles. "Do you think Sarah noticed anything last time?" Harry asked anxiously as they headed inside. Sarah Williams was a quiet girl from their class who had become a regular visitor, along with her older brother Mark. "Nah," Dudley said confidently, helping Harry gather their school books. "And even if she did, remember what Ms. Winterbourne said? Sometimes non-magical kids just think they're imagining things." The doorbell rang, and soon the living room was filled with the busy chatter of children. Sarah and Mark arrived first, followed by Tommy Chen, whose parents ran the local Chinese restaurant. These carefully chosen friends had something in common: they were all somewhat outsiders themselves, for various reasons, and had formed a tight-knit group. "Did everyone finish the maths homework?" Sarah asked, pulling out her notebook. She was the most studious of the group, always organizing their work. As the children settled into their usual study routine, Petunia watched from the kitchen, remembering Ms. Winterbourne's words about the importance of building bridges between magical and non-magical worlds. These friendships would be crucial for Harry's development. The afternoon progressed smoothly until Tommy's pencil rolled off the table. Before anyone could reach for it, it suddenly shot back up into Tommy's hand. There was a moment of startled silence. "How did you do that?" Tommy asked, staring at Harry with wide eyes. Harry froze, but Dudley smoothly jumped in. "Harry's really good at magic tricks. Been practicing for ages, right, Harry?" "Yeah," Harry said quickly, remembering their cover story. "Just sleight of hand and stuff." Sarah looked thoughtful. "My gran says some people have special gifts. She calls it having the sight or something." "That's just stories," Mark scoffed, but there was no malice in his tone. "Pretty cool trick though, Harry." The moment passed, but it marked a subtle shift. Over the next few months, more small incidents occurred around Harry's friends. A book floating slightly above the table, windows opening on their own during a hot day, dropped ice cream cones, mysteriously landing right side up. Instead of fear or rejection, Harry's friends began to accept these occurrences as just part of who he was. They developed their own explanations. Tommy decided Harry must be psychic, Sarah stuck to her grandmother's theory about special gifts, and Mark claimed it was all advanced science they didn't understand yet. Ms. Winterbourne was delighted when Petunia reported this development during one of her regular visits. "This is exactly what we hoped for," she said, watching through the window as the children played in the garden. "They're creating their own protective bubble of acceptance." When Harry eventually goes to Hogwarts, these friends will be his anchor to the non-magical world. "But won't it be hard for him to keep secrets from them?" Vernon asked, watching as Harry and his friends played a game that involved catching leaves before they hit the ground, though Harry's seemed to stay airborne a bit longer than natural. "Not as hard as you might think," Ms. Winterbourne replied. "Children have an amazing capacity to accept the extraordinary." As they grow older, most will either rationalize their memories or, in some cases, might be ready to learn the truth. The ministry has protocols for when magical children want to tell their closest non-magical friends about their abilities. The true test of these friendships came during an incident at school later that spring. A group of older boys had been bullying Tommy about his accent. Harry, feeling angry and protective, had unconsciously caused their shoelaces to tie themselves together, sending them tumbling. Instead of running away or telling tales, Sarah, Mark, and Tommy formed a tight circle around Harry and Dudley, creating a wall of solidarity. When the teachers came to investigate, all of them insisted the older boys had simply tripped. That evening, as Vernon and Petunia tucked the boys into bed, Harry seemed thoughtful. "Dad," he said, he had started calling Vernon Dad the previous year, though he knew about James. "Is it bad that my friends kind of know I'm different?" Vernon sat on the edge of Harry's bed. "Not bad at all, son. True friends accept you for who you are, even if they don't understand everything about you. Your mum had friends like that too, didn't she, pet?" Petunia nodded, thinking of the few non-magical friends Lily had kept even after going to Hogwarts. "The best friendships bridge all sorts of differences," she said softly. "And you've got the best friend of all right here," Dudley announced from his bed, throwing a pillow at Harry. As a pillow fight erupted with some pillows suspiciously defying gravity, Petunia and Vernon exchanged satisfied smiles. Their decision 7 years ago had led to more than just accepting magic. It had created a foundation of love, understanding, and genuine friendship that would serve both boys well in the years to come. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Petunia found herself looking through Lily's old school photos. There was one of her sister with her Hogwarts friends, but also several with her non-magical neighborhood friends from summer holidays. "We're doing right by him, aren't we, Lily?" she whispered to the photos, helping him build bridges between both worlds. A warm breeze rustled the curtains, and the magic monitor glowed with a soft, comforting light. Outside, a shooting star streaked across the sky, as if in answer to her question. The boy who lived was growing up surrounded not just by family love, but by the pure and accepting friendship of children who saw him for who he was, not what he could do. It was a different kind of magic, the magic of friendship, and it would prove just as powerful as any spell in the years to come. Chapter 6: The Wider Magical World. Summer of 1988 marked a significant turning point at number 4, Privet Drive. Harry's 8th birthday approached, and with it came Ms. Winterbourne's announcement that it was time to begin more structured magical education. 8 is traditionally when we start introducing magical children to the broader wizarding community, she explained during a sunny July morning visit. They're old enough to understand the importance of secrecy, but young enough to absorb new concepts naturally. Vernon looked up from his morning coffee, now served in a self-warming mug that had been a gift from the Magical Support Services. "What exactly does that entail?" "Well," Ms. Winterbourne said, pulling out her ever-present folder, "we typically start with supervised visits to magical locations. Diagon Alley, for instance." Harry, who had been listening from the doorway with Dudley, couldn't contain his excitement. "The shopping street from Mum's diary? Can Dudley come too?" "Of course," Ms. Winterbourne smiled. "Family members are always included. In fact, I've arranged for a special guided tour next weekend, if you're all agreeable." The following Saturday found the Dursleys standing outside a shabby-looking pub in London. The Leaky Cauldron, according to the sign that only Harry and Ms. Winterbourne could see clearly. Petunia and Vernon had to focus hard on the spot she pointed to, while Dudley reported seeing something fuzzy, like a TV with bad reception. "Non-magical people usually can't see it at all," Ms. Winterbourne explained, "but family members of magical children often develop a sort of peripheral awareness over time." Inside, the pub was dark and cozy, with oddly dressed patrons nursing colorful drinks that sometimes emitted sparks or changed colors. Tom, the toothless bartender, gave them a knowing wink, but thanks to arrangements made by Ms. Winterbourne, didn't make a fuss about Harry's presence. "Now then," Ms. Winterbourne said, leading them to a brick wall behind the pub, "watch carefully, Harry. This is the kind of thing you'll need to know." She tapped a specific pattern on the bricks with her wand. Harry leaned forward, memorizing the sequence, while Dudley counted the taps out loud. The wall began to shift and rearrange itself, bricks sliding apart to reveal an archway into a bustling, magical street. Diagon Alley stretched before them, a riot of color and movement. Shops displayed everything from floating books to self-stirring cauldrons. Owls swooped overhead carrying packages, and somewhere in the distance, A street vendor was selling ice cream that changed flavors with each lick. Wicked, Dudley breathed, his eyes wide. Harry grabbed his cousin's hand, pulling him toward the nearest window display featuring racing broomsticks. Now remember, Vernon said, following close behind, we are here to learn, not just shop. Though he added with a wink, I suppose a few educational purchases wouldn't hurt. Their first stop was Flourish and Blot's bookshop, where Ms. Winterbourne helped them select some basic magical education books suitable for Harry's age. A Young Wizard's Guide to Basic Magic, Magical Theory for Beginners, and Simple Spells and Safety, a children's introduction, were added to their basket. Can I get some too? Dudley asked, already flipping through A Muggle's Guide to Magical Society. Of course, Petunia said, understanding Harry's world is important for all of us. As they moved through the shop, Harry suddenly froze. On a display table sat a stack of books titled The Boy Who Lived, A Modern History. His own face, or rather, an artist's interpretation of it, smiled from the cover. Ah, Ms. Winterbourne said softly. Yes, we should discuss this. There are quite a few books written about you, Harry, some more accurate than others. Would you like to know what they say? Harry nodded slowly. Over the past few years, he'd grown more comfortable with his fame in the magical world, but it still felt strange seeing himself in books. Perhaps we should get one, Vernon suggested, so we can explain what's true and what's just speculation. Their next stop was Madame Malkin's Robes for All Occasions, not for school robes yet, but for what Ms. Winterbourne called casual magical wear. It's good for Harry to have some proper wizarding clothes for when we visit magical locations, she explained. Helps him blend in a bit more. While Harry was being fitted for a simple set of child's robes, a blonde boy about his age entered the shop with his mother. The boy's eyes widened in recognition, darting to Harry's forehead. Are you really? He began, but his mother quickly shushed him. Draco Manners, she reminded him, though she too looked curiously at Harry. Hi, Harry said simply. I'm Harry, this is my cousin Dudley. Draco Malfoy, the boy replied, seeming unsure whether to be haughty or friendly. The presence of clearly non-magical people seemed to confuse him. Ms. Winterbourne stepped forward smoothly. Ah, Mrs. Malfoy, how lovely to see you. I'm supervising young Mr. Potter's first proper visit to Diagon Alley. Something unspoken passed between the two witches, and Mrs. Malfoy nodded slightly. How progressive, she said carefully. Come, Draco, we'll return later. After they left, Harry looked questioningly at Ms. Winterbourne. Some magical families, she explained gently, have different views about non-magical people, but exposure to families like yours is helping change those views slowly but surely. The day continued with visits to various shops, each one teaching Harry something new about his heritage. At the magical menagerie, they learned about various magical pets. The apothecary provided a fascinating, if somewhat smelly, introduction to potion ingredients. Quality Quidditch supplies gave Harry his first real look at the sport his father had loved. Your dad was a chaser, Ms. Winterbourne told him as they examined a display of Quidditch equipment. Quite talented, from what I hear. The highlight of the day came at Ollivander's wand shop. Though Harry wouldn't be getting his wand for another 3 years, Mr. Ollivander had agreed to give him an educational demonstration about wand lore. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter, the old wandmaker said, his silvery eyes twinkling. When you return at 11, we'll find your perfect match. But for now, he held out a device that looked like a complex compass. This is a magical affinity meter. Would you like to see what kind of magic you might have an aptitude for? The device spun and whirred as it moved over Harry's hand, emitting different colored lights. Interesting, Ollivander murmured. Strong affinity for defensive magic like your mother, but also a natural talent for transfiguration like your father. And something else, most curious. Their final stop was Fortescue's ice cream parlor, where Florian Fortescue himself insisted on serving Harry a special sundae that changed colors and toppings with each spoonful. They sat enjoying their treats. Harry noticed other magical children pointing and whispering. You're handling the attention very well, Ms. Winterbourne commented. Harry shrugged, sharing a spoonful of his ever-changing ice cream with Dudley. They're just curious like I'd be. Besides, he grinned at his cousin, I've got my own fan club president right here. Too right, Dudley agreed, his face covered in chocolate. Wait till Sarah and Tommy hear about this. Well, the parts we can tell them anyway. On their way home, laden with packages and magical trinkets, including a self-organizing homework planner that Ms. Winterbourne insisted would be useful, Harry was quiet, processing everything he'd seen. All right, son? Vernon asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Yeah, Harry said slowly. It feels more real now. Like I can see where I'll fit in when I go to Hogwarts. But, he grabbed Dudley's hand, I don't want to fit in so much that I don't fit here anymore. That won't happen, Petunia said firmly. You're a bridge between both worlds, Harry, just like your mother was, and that's something special. That evening, Harry and Dudley sat in their room, examining their purchases. The magical books were spread across their beds, and Harry's new casual robes hung proudly next to his regular clothes. Do you think, Dudley asked, flipping through his guide to magical society, we could go back sometimes, even after you start at Hogwarts? Course we will, Harry said confidently. You're my brother, remember? We'll explore both worlds together. As they fell asleep that night, the magic monitor glowed with particularly bright colors, reflecting Harry's excitement. On his bedside table, the magical affinity meter continued to spin softly, pointing toward a future where magic and love, family and friendship would combine in ways even Ollivander couldn't predict. In her own room, Petunia added another entry to the journal she'd been keeping since Harry arrived. Today we walked the same streets Lily walked, she wrote, and this time I saw the magic through different eyes, not with jealousy, but with wonder, the way she always wanted me to see it. Chapter 7, Hidden Talents. The autumn of 1989 brought changes to number 4, Privet Drive. At 9 years old, Harry had grown into a confident child who straddled the magical and non-magical worlds with increasing ease. His room, still shared with Dudley despite Vernon's offers to separate them, had become a curious blend of both realms. Magical astronomy charts hung next to football posters, and spell theory books shared shelf space with comic books. Because Harry, Ms. Winterbourne instructed one crisp September afternoon. They were in the back garden, protected by the usual privacy wards, working on what she called pre-wand magical exercises. Harry sat cross-legged on the grass, a feather floating before him. Over the past year, his conscious control over magic had grown significantly. Now, instead of just making objects move, he was learning to change their properties. Remember, Ms. Winterbourne continued, intention is key. Imagine the feather becoming blue, see it in your mind. Dudley watched from his perch on the garden wall, homework forgotten beside him. These lessons had become a regular part of their routine, and he had appointed himself Harry's unofficial training partner. You're thinking too hard, Dudley called out. Remember what happened with my toy soldiers last week? You weren't even trying then. Harry smiled, remembering how he'd accidentally turned all of Dudley's plastic soldiers into different colors during a particularly exciting battle recreation. Relaxing his shoulders, he let the memory of that casual magic guide him. The feather's white surface began to shift, a pale blue tinge spreading from tip to base. Excellent, Ms. Winterbourne exclaimed, making notes in her ever-present folder. Your control is coming along beautifully. Most children your age can only manage accidental color changes. Inside the house, Petunia was organizing a growing collection of magical reference materials. After their first visit to Diagon Alley, she had thrown herself into learning everything she could about magical education. The kitchen now featured a cabinet of basic potion ingredients, for emergencies only, Ms. Winterbourne had stressed, and she had subscribed to several magical publications including Primary Wand, a journal for pre-Hogwarts education. Pet, Vernon called from the living room, where he was reviewing Harry's latest magical theory exercises. Come look at this. The boys got quite a knack for transfiguration concepts. Petunia joined her husband, examining Harry's neat drawings of basic transformation principles. Just like James, she said softly. Lily wrote about how talented he was at transfiguration. Their conversation was interrupted by excited shouts from the garden. They rushed outside to find Harry and Dudley staring at the feather, which was not only blue, but now sparkled with tiny points of light, like a piece of the night sky. I was just thinking about the stars we learned about in astronomy, Harry explained, and it sort of happened. Ms. Winterbourne was practically bouncing with excitement. Creative magic, and at your age, oh, this is wonderful progress. The development of Harry's magical abilities had begun attracting attention in magical education circles. Ms. Winterbourne occasionally brought other magical education specialists to observe Harry's progress, always under strict confidentiality charms. His control is remarkable, one specialist had commented. The nurturing environment has clearly allowed his magic to develop naturally, without the suppression we sometimes see in children who have to hide their abilities. This attention, however, led to an unexpected challenge when Harry's school friend Tommy arrived for a study session just as a magical education observer was leaving through the fireplace. "Whoa," Tommy exclaimed, freezing in the doorway. "Did that person just disappear?" The Dursleys exchanged worried looks, but Harry remained calm. "It's part of my magic tricks practice," he said smoothly. "Remember how I told you I'm learning stage magic? That was a special effect we're working on." Tommy's eyes lit up. "That's amazing. Will you perform at the school talent show?" "The talent show?" Harry looked uncertainly at his aunt and uncle, but it was Ms. Winterbourne who spoke up from behind Tommy, having disillusioned herself when he arrived. "That's a wonderful idea," she said, making Tommy jump. "Sorry, dear, didn't mean to startle you. I'm Harry's stage magic instructor." Later, after Tommy had gone home, the family gathered to discuss the talent show idea. "It could be risky," Vernon said, though he looked intrigued. "Actually," Ms. Winterbourne mused, "it could be perfect. If Harry establishes a reputation for clever stage magic now, any accidental magic at school might be dismissed as part of his hobby." And so began Operation Talent Show. For the next few weeks, Harry and Dudley worked together to create an act that would blend real magic with stage illusions. Ms. Winterbourne helped them acquire some basic Muggle magic props to mix with Harry's controlled magical abilities. "The trick," she explained, "is to make the real magic look fake and the fake magic look real." The night of the talent show arrived in late October. Harry stood backstage in his new magician's cape, specially enchanted by Ms. Winterbourne to add subtle sparkles, with Dudley ready to act as his assistant. Their act was a carefully choreographed mixture of classic stage illusions and subtle real magic. When Harry magically produced flowers from his sleeve, they were using a traditional magician's prop. But when those flowers slowly changed colors while Dudley passed them through a hoop, that was all Harry. The audience gasped and applauded, seeing exactly what they expected to see, a talented young magician with clever tricks. Even when Harry appeared to make a feather float, actually using his real abilities, everyone simply assumed there were hidden wires or clever lighting effects. "That was brilliant," Sarah exclaimed after the show. "How did you make those flowers change color like that?" "A magician never reveals his secrets," Dudley said with an exaggerated wink, making everyone laugh. The talent show success led to an unexpected development. Other parents began asking if Harry would perform at their children's parties, seeing him as a gifted young entertainer. "This could be complicated," Petunia worried, but Ms. Winterbourne saw an opportunity. "It's actually perfect," she said. "Regular performances will help Harry practice control, and having a known hobby explains away any unusual incidents." And so Harry Potter, famous in the magical world as the boy who lived, began building a small reputation in the Muggle world as a talented young magician. He performed at birthday parties and school events, always with Dudley as his assistant, mixing real and stage magic in ways that delighted audiences while keeping his true abilities secret. One December afternoon, after a particularly successful performance at a Christmas fair, Harry and Dudley sat in their room counting their earnings. "We could buy more magic tricks from Diagon Alley," Dudley suggested, but Harry had another idea. "I want to get special Christmas presents this year," he said, "for helping me be both kinds of magical." On Christmas morning, the family gathered around the tree to find Harry had carefully chosen gifts that bridged both worlds. A self-warming scarf for Vernon that looked perfectly normal to Muggle eyes, a magical cookbook for Petunia that included both wizarding and Muggle recipes, and for Dudley, a special set of magician's assistant props that had been subtly enhanced by Ms. Winterbourne. "You know," Vernon said that evening, watching Harry and Dudley practice their latest routine, "I think we've done more than just accept magic. We've helped create something new, a way to celebrate it in both worlds." Petunia nodded, remembering how Lily had always wanted to share her magic with her family. "We're giving Harry something precious," she said softly, "the freedom to be himself in any world." As the boys continued their practice, a real color-changing feather floating alongside stage prop cards, Ms. Winterbourne's magic monitor glowed with steady, confident light. The boy who lived was growing into someone who didn't just survive in both worlds, he was learning to thrive in them, bringing joy and wonder to each in his own unique way. In her latest report to Hogwarts, Ms. Winterbourne wrote, "Harry Potter continues to exceed expectations, but not in the ways we anticipated. His greatest magic isn't in his power or control, but in his ability to bridge worlds and bring people together. In this, he truly is his mother's son." Chapter 8: Unexpected Connections. Spring brought more than just flowers to Privet Drive. As Harry approached his 10th birthday, his magical abilities had begun attracting an unexpected sort of attention. It started with the letters. "Another one came today," Petunia said, holding up an envelope with unfamiliar magical seals, this time from a wizarding family in Bath. The growing pile of correspondence had begun after Harry's performance at a magical Muggle integrated Christmas festival that Ms. Winterbourne had carefully arranged. While most attendees saw only an unusually talented young magician, a few magically sensitive children had noticed something different about Harry's act. "They're asking if you would consider a playdate with their children," Vernon read from one letter, adjusting his reading glasses. Apparently, their daughter showed her first signs of magic by accidentally turning her tea set different colors, just like your feather trick. Ms. Winterbourne sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the letters with growing interest. "This could be an excellent opportunity," she mused. "Harry needs more interaction with magical children his age, and these families have all sworn magical oaths of discretion." "But is it safe?" Petunia asked, her protective instincts flaring. "We've kept Harry's identity secret for almost 9 years, Ms. Winterbourne replied. "These families don't know he's Harry Potter, they just see a remarkably talented young wizard who might be a good friend for their children. And frankly, he needs this exposure before Hogwarts." And so began what Dudley dubbed the magical playdate adventure. The first visit was from the Morton family. Their daughter Emma was a quiet 9-year-old with a talent for accidentally making flowers bloom out of season. "Show her your color-changing trick, Harry," Dudley encouraged, always eager to act as Harry's assistant even in private demonstrations. Emma watched in wonder as Harry made the feather shift through rainbow hues. "Can you teach me?" she asked shyly. "I can only make things happen when I'm not trying." That afternoon became a turning point. Harry discovered he had a knack for helping other magical children understand their abilities. He explained how he visualized magic, using the techniques Ms. Winterbourne had taught him. "It's like, imagine the magic is already there, in everything," he told Emma. "You're just asking it to show itself differently." By the end of the visit, Emma had managed to turn a daisy from white to pale pink, not as controlled as Harry's magic, but a significant step forward from purely accidental magic. More visits followed. The Roberts twins from Sussex, who could make objects float but couldn't control where they went. A boy from Yorkshire who spoke to garden snakes but thought he was just good at hissing. Each visit helped Harry understand his own magic better, even as he helped others understand theirs. "You're becoming quite the teacher," Ms. Winterbourne observed one day, watching Harry help young Timothy Roberts direct a floating pencil through a simple obstacle course they'd set up in the garden. Dudley had taken to documenting these sessions in what he called his assistant's log, complete with drawings of the various magical effects they witnessed. "It's like we're running a secret magic school," he said proudly. The visits also brought unexpected benefits to the Dursley household. Other magical parents shared their own experiences and knowledge, creating an informal support network for families navigating the magical world. "I never thought I'd be hosting a tea party where the main topic was containing accidental magic in public," Petunia remarked to Vernon one evening. "Lily would have loved this." However, the increasing magical activity at number 4 didn't go entirely unnoticed. One Saturday morning, as Harry was showing the Fitzgerald children how to control their shared ability to make objects change size, an owl arrived carrying an official-looking letter. "The Ministry has detected an unusual concentration of pre-Hogwarts magical activity in your area," Ms. Winterbourne read aloud, after checking the letter for any tracking charms. "They're sending an investigator next week." The news sent the household into careful preparation mode. Vernon developed what he called Operation Normal, a plan to present their magical activities in the most mundane light possible. "We'll emphasize the stage magic angle," he said, spreading out his meticulously drawn charts. "Show them how we're helping magical children channel their abilities through controlled performance." Ms. Winterbourne was impressed. "You know, this could actually work in our favor. The Ministry's biggest concern with pre-Hogwarts magic is exposure risk. If we can demonstrate how these activities are actually reducing that risk." The day of the inspection arrived with minimal fanfare. The Ministry investigator, a young witch named Ms. Clearwater, arrived dressed impressively normally in a sensible skirt and blazer. "We understand you're running some sort of magical education program," she began, reviewing her notes. "Not exactly," Ms. Winterbourne explained. "You're providing a safe space for magical children to practice control through the guise of stage magic performance. Would you like a demonstration? What followed was one of Harry's most carefully orchestrated performances yet. With Dudley's help, he demonstrated how they mixed genuine magic with stage illusions, making both seem like clever tricks to Muggle eyes. And the other children? Ms. Clearwater asked, watching Harry help Emma Morton with her flower color changing. They're learning control, Petunia explained. Instead of suppressing their magic and risking accidental outbursts, they're learning to channel it safely. Ms. Clearwater's report, which arrived a week later, was surprisingly positive. Innovative approach to pre-Hogwarts magical education, reduces risk of exposure, promotes early control, recommend continued observation but no intervention. We did it. Dudley exclaimed, performing an impromptu victory dance that somehow caused all the sofa cushions to float briefly, a bit of accidental magic that had been happening more frequently since he'd started spending so much time around magical children. Harry watched his cousin chase down the floating cushions and felt a warm glow of satisfaction. They weren't just helping him anymore, they were helping other children like him, creating a bridge between the magical and Muggle worlds that felt more natural with each passing day. That evening, as the family sat in the garden watching the sunset, Harry practiced his latest magical achievement, making tiny points of light dance in the growing darkness, like fireflies made of starlight. You know what this means, don't you? Ms. Winterbourne said softly, watching the lights reflect in Harry's glasses. When you go to Hogwarts, you won't be going alone. You'll already have friends who know the real you, not just the boy who lived. Harry smiled, directing one of his light fireflies to land on Dudley's nose, making his cousin laugh. I think, he said thoughtfully, that's the best magic we've discovered yet. In her next report to Hogwarts, Ms. Winterbourne added a personal note. What we're witnessing here isn't just the development of a powerful young wizard. It's the creation of a community that bridges both worlds, led by a boy who has never had to choose between them. When Harry Potter arrives at Hogwarts, he may very well change more than just the school. He might change how we think about magical education itself. Chapter 9. The Letter Approaches. As Harry's 11th birthday drew near, an air of anticipation settled over number 4 Privet Drive. The calendar on the kitchen wall had July 31st circled in red, with little stars drawn around it in Dudley's enthusiastic hand. Do you think it will come by regular post or by owl? Dudley asked one morning, helping himself to seconds of breakfast while keeping one eye on the windows. Owl, definitely owl, Harry replied, though he couldn't help glancing at the mail slot himself. The approach of his Hogwarts letter had been a frequent topic of discussion over the past months, ever since Ms. Winterbourne had confirmed that magical children typically received their letters in the summer before their 11th birthday. The wait wasn't exactly making Harry nervous after all. His name had been down for Hogwarts since birth, as Ms. Winterbourne often reminded them. But there was something about the official nature of it, the final confirmation that he would be joining the wizarding world properly, that set butterflies dancing in his stomach. I've been thinking, Vernon said, lowering his newspaper, perhaps we should take a family holiday before term starts. Visit the seaside one last time before you're off to school. Petunia nodded enthusiastically. We could invite some of your magical friends along, the ones who'll be starting Hogwarts with you. Make it a proper send-off. The suggestion sparked immediate excitement. Over the past year, their network of magical families had grown considerably. What had started as occasional playdates had evolved into regular gatherings, with number 4 becoming an unofficial hub for pre-Hogwarts children and their families. Ms. Winterbourne had helped them expand the privacy wards to accommodate these meetings, teaching Harry and the other children basic magical control exercises while their parents shared experiences and advice. The ministry's continued observation had actually worked in their favor, legitimizing their informal program and even leading to discreet inquiries from other magical families seeking similar support. Emma and Timothy are definitely coming to Hogwarts this year, Harry said, mentally counting his friends. And I think the Thompson twins too. Don't forget Rachel from the Magic Club, Dudley added. They had started a young magicians club at school as cover for their magical activities, mixing genuine stage magic enthusiasts with magical children who needed a safe space to practice control. The Morning Post arrived with its usual flutter of owl wings. They received regular magical correspondence now, though always carefully screened by Ms. Winterbourne's security charms. But today's delivery included something special, a thick envelope addressed to Mr. H. Potter, the Blue Bedroom, 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. "It's here," Dudley shouted, nearly knocking over his orange juice in excitement. Harry held the envelope with trembling fingers, running his thumb over the Hogwarts seal. After all the preparation, all the training, all the careful balancing of his 2 worlds, this made it real. "Well, go on then," Vernon encouraged, his voice gruff with emotion. The letter contained exactly what they'd expected: the acceptance notice, supply list, and instructions for the start of term. But seeing it in official print, with Professor McGonagall's signature at the bottom, gave it a weight that all their preparation hadn't quite captured. "You'll need to plan a proper trip to Diagon Alley," Petunia said, reading over Harry's shoulder. "Get you fitted for proper robes this time, not just practice wear. And a wand," Harry added softly. Despite his growing control over wandless magic, the thought of having his own wand still filled him with wonder. Ms. Winterbourne arrived later that morning for what would be one of their last regular training sessions. "Excellent timing," she said, examining the letter. "We can start focusing on specific preparations for Hogwarts now." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The promised seaside holiday turned into a magical Muggle celebration, with 3 magical families joining the Dursleys at a rented beach house. Ms. Winterbourne had helped arrange special wards to allow the children to practice magic safely away from prying eyes. "Watch this," Harry called out one evening, standing at the water's edge. With careful concentration, he created patterns of light dancing over the waves, making it look like starlight was playing in the foam. "Show off," Emma teased, though she joined in with her own contribution, making seashells change colors in rhythm with the waves. The other soon-to-be Hogwarts students practiced their own talents, while Dudley documented everything in his ever-present notebook. He had appointed himself unofficial historian of their magical adventures, filling pages with descriptions and drawings of their various magical achievements. "You'll have to send me regular updates from Hogwarts," he told Harry one night as they sat on the beach house's porch. "I want to know everything, even the boring bits about homework." "I'll write twice a week," Harry promised, "and we can practice mirror calling too." Ms. Winterbourne had given them a pair of enchanted mirrors for communication, though they were strictly for family use only. As July drew to a close, preparations intensified. Vernon had taken time off work to help Harry organize his school supplies, creating detailed lists and checking them against the official requirements multiple times. "Can't have you arriving unprepared," he said gruffly, though Harry caught him wiping his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Petunia threw herself into practical preparations, secretly enchanting name tags for Harry's clothes, with Ms. Winterbourne's help, and packing emergency supplies of his favorite snacks. The final week before Harry's birthday brought a surprise visitor. Professor McGonagall herself arrived for tea, officially in her capacity as deputy headmistress, checking on a Muggle-raised student, but really to see how their experiment in integrated magical education had progressed. "I must say," she commented, watching Harry demonstrate his control by making his tea stir itself while simultaneously keeping a biscuit floating precisely at mouth height, "this is not quite what we expected when we arranged for Ms. Winterbourne's supervision." "Better, I hope?" Petunia asked, a touch of anxiety in her voice. McGonagall's stern expression softened. "Much better. Mr. Potter will be entering Hogwarts with a remarkable foundation not just in magic, but in understanding how to bridge both worlds." "And the other children?" Vernon asked. "The ones who have been learning with him? We're actually considering implementing some of your methods more broadly," McGonagall admitted. "The idea of using controlled performance as a way to manage pre-Hogwarts magic. It's quite innovative." That evening, after Professor McGonagall had left, the family gathered in the garden for what had become a nightly tradition. Harry created his light fireflies, which had evolved into complex patterns that told simple stories as they danced through the air. "I'm going to miss this," he said softly, making the lights form the shape of a house their house. "It's not ending," Petunia assured him, pulling him close. "It's just changing. You'll always have both worlds, Harry. We've made sure of that." "And both worlds are better for it," Ms. Winterbourne added, watching as one of Harry's light fireflies landed on Dudley's outstretched hand, glowing briefly brighter before fading away. In her final pre-Hogwarts report, Ms. Winterbourne wrote, "As Harry Potter prepares to enter Hogwarts, he carries with him something unique, a genuine understanding of how magical and Muggle worlds can coexist and enrich each other. His journey so far has been unconventional, But perhaps that's exactly what both worlds need: a bridge builder who has never known them to be truly separate. The night before his birthday, Harry lay awake in bed, listening to Dudley's steady breathing from the other side of the room. Tomorrow, he would officially begin his journey toward Hogwarts, but he knew he wouldn't be leaving his other world behind. The Dursleys had given him something precious, the ability to belong fully in both worlds without having to choose between them. As he drifted off to sleep, his last conscious act was to create a tiny point of light that hovered between his bed and Dudley's, a small reminder that magic, like family, could bridge any distance. Chapter 10: The Final Preparations. The trip to Diagon Alley felt different this time. Harry had visited the magical shopping district several times over the years with Ms. Winterbourne and the Dursleys, but never as an official Hogwarts student. The supply list in his pocket made everything feel more real. "Wand first," Ms. Winterbourne suggested as they entered the bustling street. "It's best to get that early in the day when both you and Mr. Ollivander are fresh." Dudley could barely contain his excitement as they approached Ollivander's. He'd been theorizing about what kind of wand Harry would get ever since the Hogwarts letter arrived. "I bet it'll be something really special," he whispered, "given all the wandless magic you can already do." The shop was exactly as Ms. Winterbourne had described, narrow, shabby, and humming with magical energy. Mr. Ollivander emerged from the shadows, his silvery eyes gleaming with interest as they fell on Harry. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Potter." Vernon stepped forward protectively, but Ms. Winterbourne placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Mr. Ollivander is bound by ancient magical oaths," she reminded him. "Harry's secret is safe here." What followed was an extraordinary process of wand matching. Wand after wand passed through Harry's hand, each producing effects more spectacular than the last, a testament to his developed magical control, Mr. Ollivander noted. "Curious," the wandmaker muttered, disappearing into the back of his shop. "I wonder." When he returned, he held a single wand box with unusual care. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. The moment Harry's fingers touched the wand, he knew this was different. Warmth spread up his arm, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, forming briefly into the shape of a phoenix before dissolving. "Curious," Mr. Ollivander repeated. "Very curious. What's curious?" Harry asked, still admiring his new wand. The wandmaker explained about the wand's connection to Voldemort, watching carefully for Harry's reaction, but years of preparation had readied Harry for this moment. "A wand is a tool," he said, remembering Ms. Winterbourne's lessons. "It's the wizard who chooses how to use it." Outside the shop, Petunia hugged Harry tightly. "Lily would be so proud of how you handled that," she whispered. The rest of their shopping proceeded more cheerfully. At Madame Malkin's, Harry was fitted for his robes alongside Emma Morton, who had chosen the same day for her shopping. They chatted excitedly about houses and classes while being measured. "My mum was in Ravenclaw," Emma said, "but Dad thinks I might be a Hufflepuff." "It doesn't matter which house you're in," Harry replied, remembering Ms. Winterbourne's teachings about Hogwarts houses. "What matters is making it your home." Flourish and Blots was a family favorite. Vernon had developed a particular interest in magical theory books, always eager to understand more about how magic worked. They left with not just Harry's required texts, but several additional books on magical history and theory. "Knowledge is power in any world," Vernon said sagely, shrinking the book bag with a charm Ms. Winterbourne had taught him for emergencies. Their final stop was the magical menagerie. Although Harry had originally planned to wait on getting a pet, a snowy owl had caught his eye. She seemed to watch him with unusual intelligence. "She's perfect," Dudley declared. "She can carry letters between us." The last week before September first passed in a blur of preparation and celebration. Harry's magical friends visited regularly, all of them practicing simple spells with their new wands under Ms. Winterbourne's supervision. The Young Magicians Club held a special farewell performance, where Harry and his fellow Hogwarts-bound friends put on their most spectacular show yet. They carefully balanced stage magic with real magic, creating an unforgettable display that had their audience cheering. "You'll keep the club going?" Harry asked Dudley as they packed up their props. "Course I will," Dudley replied. "Someone's got to help the next batch of magical kids, haven't they?" The night before departure, Harry couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, writing letters to be delivered later, one to thank Ms. Winterbourne for everything she'd taught him, another for Dudley with instructions for continuing their magical experiments, and one for his aunt and uncle expressing his gratitude for their unwavering support. His new owl, whom he'd named Hedwig after a famous witch from his History of Magic book, watched him write with apparent approval. "You'll help me keep in touch with everyone, won't you?" he asked her. She hooted softly in response. Morning arrived with organized chaos. Despite Vernon's military precision packing plan, last-minute items kept appearing. Petunia fluttered between Harry's trunk and the kitchen, adding more snacks and checking his name tags one final time. Ms. Winterbourne arrived early to help with the final preparations. She presented Harry with a special gift, a modified version of his practice notebook, enchanted to look like a regular school planner to anyone but him. "For recording your continued experiments," she said with a wink. "Just because you're going to Hogwarts doesn't mean we stop our research." As they loaded Harry's trunk into the car, Dudley handed over his own gift, a scrapbook filled with photos and notes from their years of magical practice together. "So you don't forget where you started," he said gruffly, quickly wiping his eyes. Standing in their driveway, Harry looked back at number 4, Privet Drive. The house where he had grown up learning to balance two worlds, where magic had been celebrated rather than feared, where his family had turned an unusual situation into something extraordinary. "Ready?" Vernon asked, starting the car. Harry nodded, holding his wand in one hand and Dudley's scrapbook in the other. He was ready not just for Hogwarts, but for bringing his unique perspective to the magical world. As Ms. Winterbourne had written in her final report, Harry Potter enters Hogwarts not as a boy discovering magic, but as a bridge builder who has already learned to blend both worlds harmoniously. The car pulled away from Privet Drive, carrying Harry toward his next great adventure. But unlike many young wizards leaving for Hogwarts, he wasn't leaving his Muggle world behind. Instead, he was taking the best of both worlds with him, ready to show Hogwarts what was possible when magic and Muggle life were allowed to complement each other perfectly. Chapter 11: A New World Begins. Platform 9 3/4 buzzed with the usual 1st of September excitement. Harry stood with the Dursleys, taking in the sight of the Scarlet steam engine while Hedwig dozed in her cage. "Remember," Vernon said, checking Harry's trunk one last time, "you can mirror call us tonight after the feast. We want to hear everything, especially which house you're sorted into. And don't forget to write to your friends in the Young Magicians Club," Dudley added. "They're all betting you'll be in Gryffindor." Harry hugged his family goodbye, including an extra squeeze for Petunia, who was trying very hard not to cry. As he pushed his trolley toward the train, he heard a familiar voice. "Harry, over here," Emma Morton waved from a carriage window. Harry grinned, relieved to see a friendly face. After storing his trunk, Harry found himself sharing a compartment with Emma and a red-haired boy who introduced himself as Ron Weasley. Ron seemed slightly nervous at first, but relaxed when Harry showed genuine interest in his family stories. "You really have 5 older brothers?" Harry asked, fascinated. "That must be brilliant for learning magic." "It's all right," Ron shrugged, though he seemed pleased by Harry's enthusiasm. "Fred and George, they're twins, they know loads of tricks. Percy's more about rules, though." Their conversation was interrupted by a girl with bushy brown hair who appeared in the doorway, already wearing her Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one." "No toads here," Emma replied, "but Harry's brilliant at finding things. He used to help me find my lost jewelry all the time during magic practice." The girl's eyes lit up with interest. "Magic practice? But I thought we weren't allowed to do magic before Hogwarts. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. I've tried a few simple spells myself, just for practice, and they've all worked for me." Harry explained about the Young Magicians Club and how they'd use stage magic as cover for learning magical control. Hermione listened with rapt attention, immediately pulling out a notebook to take notes. "That's absolutely brilliant," she exclaimed. "I wish I'd known about something like that. I had to hide all my practice. Is that how you learned wandless magic?" The mention of wandless magic caught Ron's attention. "You can do wandless magic properly, I mean, not just accidental," Harry demonstrated by making a few sparkles dance above his palm, a simple trick he'd mastered years ago. Ron's eyes widened with appreciation, while Hermione practically bounced with excitement. "Oh, you must teach me. I've read about wandless magic, of course, but all the books say it's very advanced." Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of the snack trolley. Harry, remembering Petunia's advice about making friends, bought enough treats for everyone to share. As they sampled Bertie Bott's every flavor beans and chocolate frogs, Harry found himself explaining Muggle sweets to Ron, while Hermione and Emma discussed the differences between magical and non-magical education. "So you already know some other students starting this year?" Ron asked between bites of a pumpkin pasty. A few, Harry nodded. We had this sort of informal study group. Ms. Winterbourne, she was my magical tutor. She helped us learn controls so we wouldn't have accidents at Muggle school. Wish I'd had that, said a new voice. The round-faced boy from earlier Neville stood in the doorway, looking dejected. Still haven't found Trevor. We could help you look, Harry offered. I learned a few tracking charms from Ms. Winterbourne. They're not perfect, but they might help. The next few minutes turned into an impromptu search party. Harry demonstrated the simple tracking charm he knew, while Hermione quickly memorized the technique and suggested improvements. Ron proved to know all the best places a toad might hide on a train, thanks to his brother's experiences, and Emma kept other students from getting too curious about their activities. They finally found Trevor in the luggage car, apparently attempting to make friends with someone's cat. Neville was so relieved he nearly cried. That was proper teamwork, Ron said admiringly as they returned to their compartment. You lot really know your stuff. The rest of the journey passed pleasantly, with Harry sharing stories about his mixed magical Muggle upbringing while learning about wizarding families from Ron and magical discovery from Hermione. Emma occasionally added her own experiences, helping bridge the different perspectives. As darkness fell and Hogwarts drew near, Harry felt a mixture of excitement and gratitude. He was already making friends who seemed to appreciate both sides of his life: Hermione's eager academic interest, Ron's practical wizarding knowledge, and Emma's shared experience of bridging both worlds. The first sight of Hogwarts Castle drew gasps from everyone in their compartment. As they followed Hagrid's booming voice toward the boats, Harry found himself between Ron and Hermione, with Emma and Neville close behind. It's even more amazing than Hogwarts, a history described, Hermione whispered as their boat glided across the lake. Fred and George said the giant squid sometimes grabs boats, Ron added with a grin, but I think they were having me on. The entrance hall was exactly as Ms. Winterbourne had described, but no description could have captured the mix of excitement and nervousness among the first years as they waited to be sorted. Harry noticed some students practicing spells under their breath and smiled, remembering his own preparation sessions. Whatever house we're in, he said to his new friends, we'll still study together, right? Of course, Hermione agreed immediately. Inter-house study groups are actually encouraged according to Hogwarts, a history, everyone finished for her, laughing. As Professor McGonagall led them into the Great Hall, Harry touched his robe pocket where the enchanted mirror lay, thinking of Dudley and his parents waiting to hear about the sorting. He'd learned over the years that having a foot in both worlds didn't mean having to choose between them, it meant having twice as much support, twice as much understanding, and twice as many perspectives to share. The Sorting Hat's song filled the hall, and Harry Potter, the boy who had grown up bridging two worlds, stepped forward to begin his next great adventure not alone, but with new friends who seemed ready to understand both sides of who he was. Chapter 12, Finding His Place. GOFFINDOR, the Sorting Hat declared, and Harry felt a wave of relief wash over him. He'd spent enough time with Ms. Winterbourne discussing the houses to know he'd be happy anywhere, but something about Gryffindor felt right. As he joined the cheering table, he was delighted to see Ron and Hermione had also been sorted into Gryffindor. Emma had gone to Hufflepuff, but they'd already agreed to maintain their study group across house lines. Later that night after the feast, Harry sat cross-legged on his bed in the Gryffindor dormitory, holding the enchanted mirror. Dudley's excited face appeared immediately. Well, his cousin demanded. Tell us everything. The Dursleys gathered around their own mirror as Harry recounted the sorting, the feast, and his new friends. Vernon beamed with pride when Harry described helping Neville find his toad. Using those tracking charms for good cause, he said approvingly. That's my boy. The next morning brought the start of classes. Harry found himself naturally falling into the role of bridge builder between his classmates. When Hermione's encyclopedic knowledge of magic intimidated others, he helped translate it into practical terms. When Ron's casual familiarity with the wizarding world left Muggle-born students confused, Harry could explain the connections. In Charms class, Professor Flitwick was impressed by the first year's unusual level of control. Mr. Potter, he squeaked after Harry helped Neville perfect his wand grip, I understand you had some preliminary magical training? Yes, sir, Harry replied. Ms. Winterbourne helped several of us learn control through a mixed magical Muggle program. This caught the tiny professor's interest. During their next class, he He had Harry demonstrate some of his wandless techniques, which led to an impromptu discussion about the relationship between staged performance and magical control. 5 points to Gryffindor, Flitwick announced. For innovative magical theory, potions was more challenging. Professor Snape seemed to have conflicting feelings about Harry. His eyes held recognition, perhaps of Lily, but his words were often sharp. However, Harry's experience helping Petunia with her magical Muggle fusion cooking proved unexpectedly useful. The principle is similar to regular cooking, he explained to Ron as they prepared ingredients. It's all about timing and understanding how things interact. Correct, Snape said silently from behind them, making them jump. He awarded no points, but his usual criticism was notably absent. During their first flying lesson, Harry discovered that his stage performance experience helped with broomstick control. When Neville lost control of his broom, Harry's quick thinking and steady hand helped prevent a serious accident. "Excellent work, Potter," Madam Hooch called out. "Have you flown before?" "No, ma'am," Harry replied, "but Ms. Winterbourne taught us about magical control through movement. It's a bit like dance, really." This led to Harry being recommended for the Quidditch team, much to Oliver Wood's delight. "We haven't had a seeker with formal movement training before," he said excitedly during Harry's first practice. "This could be brilliant." Between classes, Harry maintained his connections to both worlds. He wrote regular letters to the Young Magicians Club, sharing safe versions of magical theory that Dudley could use in their performances. His mirror calls home became a favorite evening activity in the Gryffindor common room, with his new friends often joining in to meet the famous Dursleys they'd heard so much about. "Is it true you use Muggle magic tricks to help teach magical control?" Hermione asked during one call, fascinated by Dudley's descriptions of their club. "Works brilliant," Dudley replied proudly. "We've got 3 new magical kids this term already." The mixture of magical and Muggle perspectives proved particularly useful when facing school challenges. When they discovered the 3rd-floor corridor was forbidden, Hermione immediately went to the library for magical research, while Harry suggested they also consider Muggle security principles Vernon had taught him. "Dad says sometimes the simplest solution is the most overlooked," he explained during a study session that now included students from all houses. "That makes sense," Ron agreed, surprising everyone. "Fred and George always say the best pranks are the ones that combine magical and Muggle tricks. People never see them coming." As autumn settled over Hogwarts, Harry found himself at the center of an increasingly diverse group of friends. His study sessions in the library now included not just Ron and Hermione, but also Emma from Hufflepuff, a few curious Ravenclaws, and even a couple of Slytherins who were interested in his unique magical control techniques. "You're breaking down house barriers already," Professor McGonagall commented one evening, finding them all practicing transfiguration together, "just like your mother used to." The mention of Lily sparked a conversation with Petunia during his next mirror call. "She would have loved this," his aunt said softly, "seeing you bring people together, helping them understand both worlds. Not everything was perfect, of course. Some purebloods looked down on his Muggle connections, while a few Muggle-born students thought he was showing off with his wandless abilities. But Harry's years of balancing both worlds had taught him patience and understanding. People fear what they don't understand, Ms. Winterbourne had always said, so help them understand." One evening, as Harry sat by the common room fire completing his homework, Ron and Hermione on either side of him, he felt a deep sense of contentment. On the table lay letters from home, magical textbooks, and drawings from the Young Magicians Club. His 2 worlds weren't separate anymore, they were merging, creating something new and wonderful. "You know what's brilliant?" Ron said suddenly, looking up from his charms essay. "How you make everything fit together. Magic, Muggle stuff, different houses. It all just works." Hermione nodded enthusiastically. "I was so worried about fitting in here, being Muggle-born, but you've shown us how both worlds can complement each other." Harry smiled, remembering his family's support, Ms. Winterbourne's guidance, and all the people who had helped him learn to balance his 2 worlds. Now he could help others do the same. In his next letter home, he wrote, "Hogwarts is amazing, but not just for the magic. It's amazing because I can be fully myself here, both magical and Muggle, both a wizard and just Harry. Thank you for teaching me that I never had to choose between worlds. Instead, I get to help build bridges between them." Chapter 13, Halloween Revelations. October brought crisp autumn winds to Hogwarts and a new set of challenges for Harry. Between Quidditch practice, his expanding study group, and maintaining connections with home, his schedule was busier than ever. "You need a proper planning system," Hermione declared one evening in the library, watching Harry juggle his various commitments. She'd become increasingly impressed with his organized approach to balancing magical and Muggle techniques. "Actually," Harry replied, pulling out his enchanted notebook from Ms. Winterbourne, "I've got something better." The notebook had become a source of fascination for his friends. To most people, it appeared to be a simple planner, but to Harry and those he trusted, it revealed detailed notes on combining magical and Muggle techniques. "Brilliant!" Ron exclaimed, watching Harry demonstrate how he'd been documenting the similarities between wizarding chess strategy and Muggle military tactics Vernon had taught him. "No wonder you've been getting better at chess." As Halloween approached, Harry noticed Hermione spending more time helping Neville with his confidence issues. She'd adopted some of the techniques from the Young Magicians Club, teaching him to present a confident front even when he felt uncertain. "It's like stage presence," Harry explained during one of their practice sessions. "Sometimes acting confident is the first step to becoming confident." The Halloween feast promised to be spectacular, but it was interrupted by Professor Quirrell's dramatic announcement about a troll in the dungeons. In the chaos that followed, Harry's mixed magical Muggle training proved unexpectedly useful. "Wait," he called to Ron and Hermione as they headed to Gryffindor Tower. "Didn't you say Lavender was crying in the girls' bathroom? She doesn't know about the troll." Thanks to Vernon's insistence on emergency protocols and Ms. Winterbourne's magical defense training, Harry had developed good instincts for crisis management. He quickly organized a small rescue party, combining Ron's wizarding knowledge with Hermione's spell expertise and his own practical experience. They found Lavender just as the troll discovered her. What followed was a perfect example of their complementary skills: Hermione's quick spell work, Ron's strategic thinking, and Harry's ability to combine magical and physical solutions. "The cleaning charms," Harry called out, remembering how they'd practiced making floors slippery during their stage performances. "Like we did in the magic show," understanding flashed in Hermione's eyes. She cast the charm while Ron used Wingardium Leviosa on the troll's club. The combination of slippery floor and falling club proved highly effective. When the teachers arrived, they found 4 students safe, 1 unconscious troll, and an excellent demonstration of inter-house cooperation for Lavender's rescue had involved students from multiple houses working together. "Explain yourselves," Professor McGonagall demanded, though Harry caught a hint of pride in her stern expression. Harry described their actions, emphasizing how they'd combined various skills and knowledge. "We used what you taught us about magical defense, Professor, along with some stage performance techniques and Uncle Vernon's emergency protocols." Later, in Professor Dumbledore's office, the headmaster seemed particularly interested in how they'd coordinated their response. "Most remarkable," he said, eyes twinkling. "Your ability to blend different approaches, Harry, reminds me very much of your mother. She too had a gift for seeing connections others missed." The aftermath of the troll incident had several interesting effects. The study group expanded as more students sought to learn Harry's combined magical Muggle techniques. Even some older students began showing interest, particularly in the practical applications. During his next mirror call home, Vernon was bursting with pride. "That's my boy, using proper emergency procedures, though perhaps next time inform a teacher first." Dudley was more interested in the practical aspects. "Could you show me that cleaning charm trick? Might be useful for our next performance." The incident also caught Professor Snape's attention. During the next potions class, he paused by Harry's cauldron. "Your mother," he said quietly, "was particularly skilled at adapting Muggle chemistry principles to potion making. Perhaps you have inherited more than her eyes." As November began, Harry found himself reflecting on how his unique upbringing had prepared him for Hogwarts in unexpected ways. His latest letter to Ms. Winterbourne detailed this revelation. It's not just about knowing spells or having magical control. It's about understanding how different kinds of knowledge can work together. The Young Magicians Club taught us more than just hiding magic. It taught us how to adapt and combine different skills. His growing friendship with Ron and Hermione deepened through their shared experience. Ron began showing more interest in Muggle strategic games, while Hermione started incorporating performance techniques into her study methods. "It's like you've created your own kind of magic," Emma commented during one of their inter-house study sessions. "Not just wizard or Muggle, but something new." The first Quidditch match of the season approached, and Harry's unique training proved valuable there too. Oliver Wood was amazed at how Harry incorporated dance-like movements into his flying style. "Never seen anything like it," he told the team. "Combining Muggle performance techniques with magical flying, it's revolutionary." During one practice session, Fred and George pulled Harry aside. "We've been thinking," Fred began, "about your magical Muggle tricks," George continued. "For our pranks," they finished together. Harry grinned, remembering all the times he and Dudley had combined practical jokes with magical effects in their performances. "I might have some ideas," he said, "but we'll need to be careful about the execution." As the autumn term progressed, Harry continued writing his observations in the enchanted notebook. One evening, sitting by the common room fire with Ron and Hermione, he realized something important. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first got my Hogwarts letter, I worried about having to choose between worlds. But being here has shown me that we don't have to choose. We can take the best from both and create something even better." Hermione looked up from her charms homework. "You're not just learning magic here, Harry. You're teaching all of us a new way to think about it." "Yeah," Ron agreed, moving his knight on the chessboard they'd enhanced with both magical and Muggle rules. "And it's bloody brilliant." That night, Harry added a new note to his notebook. "Maybe this is what Ms. Winterbourne meant about bridge building. It's not about keeping worlds separate and walking between them. It's about bringing them together and showing everyone how much stronger we can be when we don't limit ourselves to just one way of thinking."
Don't forget to subscribe and like for the continuation of the fan fiction series. Write your favorite part in the comments.